All right, hello everyone. Thank you all so much for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us today. We appreciate your time for joining us for our Global Guidance Summit series, represented through AIRR-NA. And today I'm going to share more about the topic of studying in Canada in the process, important process to kind of take note of when looking into studying in Canada. So my name is Tomoka Mano. I'm the Associate International Student Recruiter and Advisor for the University of British Columbia, and I am based in Rochester, New York. So a few key factors when it comes to looking into Canada and some things and perks that I usually like to share when talking to students and counselors. The three main pillars are the academic excellence, ideal location, and active learning pieces. So starting off with the education portion of Canada. Education represented in Canada has been represented through a lot of rankings worldwide. And so Canada has been ranked in the top 10 consistently for quality of education in a lot of these rankings. And so this shows a lot of how the Canadian government puts a lot of time and effort into not only the K through 12 system, but also within the post-secondary system as well. And so you're getting a lot of that effort and as well as the money that gets put into education and prioritized so that universities can also utilize those access to be able to put more into research opportunities and to be able to kind of give back to the community in their surrounding areas, but also as well as throughout the country of Canada as well. Alongside the education piece, there's also a few different types of active learning styles that students are able to be a part of. The most popular one being the cooperative education piece, or co-op, as you might know of. But a lot of Canadian universities offer these co-op programs. These are very similar to internship programs where these co-op programs are integrated into the degree programs at these universities. And so within these co-op programs, students are able to take time off for a semester or even for a full year. And these are also paid programs for the most part. And so they're also able to earn money from there. But within that time period of the co-op program, whether that's throughout Canada or if they wanted to explore a co-op program that is offered by the university abroad, that can also be another perk and potential that students can also look into partaking in. But these co-op programs will help students be able to kind of learn more about their field that they're trying to work into, to seeing if this might be a right fit, but also being able to experience and network with these companies or organizations that they're a part of and be able to learn from one another and also be able to strengthen their resume so that whether they receive a job offer by the time they graduate or even be able to just have strong networks and even have short stories to tell employers, these are great opportunities that students are taking advantage of. And so students are able to typically do these co-op programs during the third and fourth year. So again, they're taking a pause with their education, with their classes, and they're just strictly immersing themselves with the work-life experience through there. And so because of that, sometimes students will have to extend their study at university, but students usually don't mind that just because of the strong experience that they immerse themselves with and also get that experience with too. Another portion of looking into Canada is the ideal location as well. It's also very close, of course, going from the US to Canada. So you can actually take your car if your student wants to just bring their car with them. So they don't really have to worry about that. But also there's just a lot of beautiful locations and also safe locations available and accessible for students wherever they go with their Canadian institution of choice. It's also a very welcoming community, not only within those areas, but also just within the country as well. It is a very diverse country as well, where many people from all over the world are coming to either live or even study in Canada as well. So this is a very nice perk into looking into studying in Canada. So this is just kind of like a big picture that I've created. Of course, not all universities are represented in Canada, but this is just to kind of show what universities can be found across each province. Most of the provinces have some type of representation of a university, whether that's public or private or both. So just kind of being able to help you with a nice bigger picture that there are a lot of available options and opportunities for students to explore their options across the country. So the main piece of the style of education is that most, on average, are four-year undergraduate degrees. And so with that being said, there might be some universities in Canada that do offer three-year undergraduate degree programs, but for the most part, they are 4 years. And with that, we have over 200 public and private institutions across Canada, represented with over 15,000 programs at all levels and all fields of study. So if your student has some kind of niche specific program that they are looking for, that can be something that could potentially be found at a university in Canada. But there are a plethora of options to look into. So that can be another option as to why a student could be looking into Canada, of course. One thing to keep in mind is that I'm sure a lot of students are taking AP classes or even IB or A-level courses. Those can also be transferred into university credit as well. So most institutions will accept those as long as they send their scores through the official site and being able to receive them, they can receive university credit for that as well. When it comes to student life, there are a lot of things that can happen on campuses. But the one thing that I will bring attention to that is most different compared to the US institutions is that one, sports really isn't as big in Canada, as well as Greek life organizations aren't as popular and aren't as an opportunity in Canada than it is in the US. So if your students are very much looking for a sports lifestyle where it has built that community within the university and as well as a big Greek life community, Canadian institutions might not be a good fit for them. But there still are some sports programs as well as Greek life organizations that can be found across Canada. But one thing to keep in note is that for Greek life organizations, there's usually only about like 10 to 15 Canadian universities that even offer them. And even if they offer them, there's only a small population of those students even being involved in Greek life. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So for example, UBC does offer fraternities and sororities, but I believe it's about as low as 1% of the student population are even involved in Greek life organizations. So that really shows that it's really not as big as it is in the US. For sports, we usually go through U Sports, so we don't really even go through NCAA as it is in the US. So it's another thing to keep in mind. The sports recruitment process might be slightly different, as well as the sports college scholarships. Those award amounts will also be less than US amounts for sports scholarships as well. So another thing to keep in mind. But of course, if students still want to be involved in sports, but not necessarily either through the varsity level, but still want to be either competitive or just more for like recreational purposes, there are a plethora of options within that. There's a lot of popular ones, and there's also more smaller, lesser known sports also represented within the recreational and intramural sports levels as well. So there's options that students can look into to be involved in through that process and pathway as well. Clubs and organizations are, of course, still big in Canada, so that's usually where students are able to find their community on campus. But of course, it's still easy to be able to find your community even within the city or area that your student is looking into for that university lifestyle as well. And so this is a great way to be able to get involved, being able to either for hobby specific or even just more academically related as well. If students want to go more international than they already are, they can go through exchange programs or even study abroad programs that universities offer in Canada. Exchange programs and study abroad programs, they are slightly different, but still have the same type of meaning to it. So many universities will offer both. The difference between the two is the fact that for exchange programs, they are more guaranteed when it comes to the price, the cost of the exchange program. They're usually paying the home institution tuition. That might be is what is offered. And also the guaranteed of their credits easily being able to transfer back into university credits and also replacing the university courses at their home institution as well. So that is a little bit more stable and a more guaranteed way of an exchange program. If students are looking for a program where the university doesn't have partnership with a university abroad, students can still be able to study abroad. Those opportunities are still available. It's just that it's not as firm and easily being able to transfer their credits back into their home institution as well. So those are some main differences. Of course, universities have it differently across Canada, so I would recommend to just double check to make sure these are some options that students can look into and have some kind of difference within those exchange and study abroad programs. Other things that are offered, of course, there are support services just because a lot of Canadian institutions also have many international students coming from outside of Canada studying at that institution. We do have a plethora of support services that students are able to access at any point. Many universities usually offer them not only throughout their 4 years, but even beyond their 4 years as well. So even during as an alumni, they can still sometimes even access some of those support services. So those support services are pretty common, as you might hear, whether that's like academic support services, career services. If they're looking for more health and wellness related, there's usually like mental health program, peer support networks, things like that. There's also more services directed towards like indigenous students, LGBTQ plus students, students with disabilities, et cetera, and so forth. So there's quite a few different types of support services for students who are looking for them. They can access that again at any point during their time at the university. A little quick short overview of just the process of looking into universities and applying to universities, but also studying at that university as well to kind of keep in mind. There are, again, some slight differences compared to the US, but the main one is that not many universities in Canada use the Common App, so it's more provincial or university-specific application system. And so for the most part, most universities will either like their application can either be found through the province or just within the university system. So my recommendation is to just kind of maybe start off with looking at the university and seeing what platform they use. But a lot of them, like for instance, British Columbia, they go through the Education Planner BC. Ontario usually goes through the OUAC. So those are some small examples of what you can kind of see the patterns of to kind of go through the submitting the application process for those universities. Another big thing is that for Canadian universities, students are applying directly into the degree program, not the university as a whole, or not even the major in itself. So within the degree program, it's very similar to the US, where it's like the School of Engineering or School of Business, things like that, where they're just applying directly into that school of that university. And so whenever I talk to students and counselors, it's very important for students to be aware that they do need to know what subject area they want to study before looking into universities that they want to go to, just because sometimes maybe that university doesn't have that degree program. So just to kind of start off from there as well, there really is no such thing as an undecided program. And so again, like I said, students will kind of need to know even just what broad subject area they want to study. Within that degree program, students will also need to double check to make sure if that program requires any specific high school requirements on top of their regular US curriculum requirements in general. So for instance, for UBC, we do require for science, we require like 1 year of chemistry, 1 year of physics, and 1 year of pre-calculus. And so if students don't have that, they need to just make sure that they have that by the first semester of their senior year. Just as an example. So those might be something that students should also look into when researching universities in Canada. Canadian universities are very transparent in what we're looking for. And so we're pretty straightforward with that. So you can check that on their website on what degree program as well as what curriculum you're using. So if you're going through like an IB program, degree diploma program, or even just like a regular US curriculum, you can kind of filter it through there as well. Universities are pretty typically test optional as well for most programs too. Some programs at a university might require students to submit a test score for standardized tests, but for the most part, most programs do not require that. If students want to submit their SAT or ACT, they're more than welcome to if they are a test optional school. But of course, if they don't want to submit it and they are a test optional school, it most likely just won't count against you either. So that's another thing to keep in mind. There's also really no recommendation letters or essays for these applications for most universities and even programs too. the application will tell you if we do need them or not, but for the most part, no recommendation letters. There's some universities that do require like short essays, whether that's programs or even just universities in itself. Like I said, again, for an example, for UBC, we do require a short essay, but we don't require a recommendation letter. And so those are some things to just kind of keep an eye on. But again, the application will share what is needed. In replacement of recommendation letters, we do require contact references for the most part. And so as long as students have put down the contact references, the contact information of those references on their application, the admissions teams at that university can reach out to the contact references that they labeled on their application in case they have any questions about the application. But for the most part, most universities follow that kind of same guideline. So they're really just looking at grades and course grades in specific too. Moving along the visa and immigration process, one thing to keep in mind is that I am not an expert in the visa and immigration process. I am not trained, and so I'm not legally certified either. So if you have any specific questions about the visa and immigration process, a lot of university reps will be directing you to their immigration office team for more of those certain specific questions, or you can also direct your questions to the IRCC for the immigration process in Canada. But one thing I can tell you is that study permits are required for international students. So as long as they don't have a Canadian citizenship or dual citizenship, they will be required to submit a study permit. One thing that has been new recently within the past few years that Canada has implemented is the requirement of something called a provincial attestation letter, or PAL for short. This PAL shows that a student has accepted their offer into that specific Canadian university, and that they have already submitted their deposits to show commitment that they are for the reason as to why they are going to Canada. So that PAL will be given to the student from the university, and that student will have to then submit their PAL with their study permit in order to have a smoother process in the evaluation for their study permit applications. Students can also work up to 24 work hours per week during regular academic terms on campus and or off campus in total. It used to be 20 hours, but then as of recently this year, it has gone up to 24 work hours. And so students want to work part-time, that is an opportunity they can do with their study permit proof as well. Another perk about studying in Canada is that students can receive up to a 3-year postgrad work permit. Of course, there are details of eligibility for this, but for the most part, as long as you have been a full-time student throughout your time at that university in Canada, students will be able to apply for this postgrad work permit. But of course, I recommend just working with the immigration advisor once you're a student to make sure that you are on track to that so that you can apply for that and be able to stay up to 3 years in Canada afterwards. Some key notable differences that I might not have shared throughout this presentation to kind of note on in comparison to like the US application process and even just in general is that applications typically open late for Canadian universities. And so they typically open in early October. And so there still is some time to just kind of explore, look into the universities, see what requirements students still have and don't have. And they can start applying once it opens in early October. With that being said, there also are no early action or early decision deadlines. Typically, there's usually just a general deadline, usually in like January or February, but again, double check with the university. And so there really is no like commitment or binding contracts or anything like that. So there are universities that might have an earlier deadline, but it's not considered an early action or early decision deadline. And then students will have to upload their unofficial documents after they submit their application. So that's a little bit unique where students will have to submit their application first in order to be able to upload their transcripts and other supporting documents as well. After they have submitted all of their supporting documents required for their program and for that university, admissions will then go through a rolling decision process. They're a rolling admission decision process. Typically that happens once everything is set into place. And so typically students can hear back as early as January, as late April, and sometimes even onto May. And so that's just another thing to kind of keep in mind as well. Outside of the application process, one other notable difference that students might be able to pick up on, and you might also be able to pick up on, is that single rooms in residence are more common than shared rooms as compared to the US, where it's more common to have shared rooms. So that also goes back and ties into the more independent side of peace, where if students want to study abroad to experience a more independent side of that, and being able to have that living style of independence, but still having a community. This is a great option where they can utilize a single room in residence. But of course, if students still want to choose a shared room, that can also be an option that universities also offer as well. Some helpful resources that you can also access, kind of like a starting point, that might be helpful for looking into just studying in Canada for your students is the first one is definitely the go-to is usually the EduCanada website. This is a very helpful overview of just studying in Canada, what is needed, what is something you should be aware of, things like that, where you can find university websites or like university information, international scholarships, how to go through the study permit process. There's like a link for the IRCC, things like that. If students know what province they want to study, where they want to study, there are some provincial websites that students can explore. So some of them, for instance, being one in British Columbia, one in Ontario, one in Alberta, just to name a few. So if students already know they just want to go to that certain province, but they're still open to whatever university, those websites are helpful with sharing the whole list of universities in that province, as well as the process, who to contact, how to apply, when to apply, things like that. So those are helpful as well. Most recently that I have discovered is the University Study website specifically for Canada. And so I would say in my personal recommendation, this is a good website to utilize when it comes to if students already know what program, but they're very open to whatever university or wherever in Canada. This is a great tool where there's like a search engine where you can like filter through what program your student is interested in and seeing which universities offer that certain program your student is looking for. So that can be another handy resource to kind of share with your students or even just for yourself as well. So these are some resources to start off with. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me and I can always direct any other questions to our other fellow Canadian institutions as well. I will be taking questions now, so feel free to add them in the chat box. And while you are adding other questions you might want to ask me, since we do have some time, I just wanted to remind you, in case you haven't heard already, AIRR-NA will be hosting some upcoming events. And so the first one being the NACAC conference reception. So if you will be at the NACAC conference, a lot of our AIRR-NA reps will also be at the NACAC conference in Columbus, Ohio. So we will be offering a reception. There's also a good handful of AIRR-NA reps who will also be presenting for their sessions for NACAC. So feel free to stop by for their sessions as well. And then we'll also be having some tours for counselor luncheons as well as international university fairs. The first tour being happening in Texas in November, and then the East Coast tour in late January, and then the West Coast tour happening in late February. So this is a great opportunity that if you are living in these nearby cities, we'll be coming to you. We'll be offering counselor luncheons, so you can sign up and register for those if you want to join in for our counselor lunches, where you get to learn more about just studying internationally, but also being able to meet with other AIRR-NA reps. And if you have any students living in these nearby cities, you can always send those your students to the international university fairs that will be partnering with high schools in that area. So that will be a very similar pattern for the Texas East Coast and West Coast tours. And then you can also register through the QR code shown on the screen here, or you can also just find them on our website as well. All right, I am going to look at the questions now, and hopefully I can answer them. Okay, the first question asks, is it generally okay if the student is in progress in the first semester of a year-long pre-calc course in their senior year when they apply? Generally speaking, yes. As long as you have it shown on your student's transcript on their first semester of their first semester of their senior year, that counts as being part of the like high school minimum course requirements for that program. So as long as you have that shown on there, that is good to go. Yes. Another question, just to clarify regarding applying for a degree, are students applying to the engineering department or specifically to a type of engineering? Good question. So you're applying directly to the degree. So within your example, you'll be applying into the School of Engineering. And then once you become a student, typically, usually either during their first year or after their first year, they will then apply directly into the major of choice or like the specialization of choice. And this goes with a lot of other programs as well. Typically, you'll just apply directly to the degree program. So like whether that's engineering or the arts, the sciences, fine arts, etc. And then after that, once you become a student is whenever you start going through the process of declaring a major. Another question asks, can you speak to the personal profile questions for UBC? Are all students required to answer these in addition to the course-related questions? Sure, I can do that too. So for the personal profile questions, students are required to answer these. If they are going to apply to a certain degree program that also asks their own degree program questions, you will have to answer those as well. So typically you'll have to answer both the personal profile questions, which are more general to the university in itself. And then if there are any questions from a certain program that the student is applying to, they will have to answer those questions in relation to. But for the most part, in general, students are just having to write to answer the essays for the personal profile questions. Okay, I think someone has their hand raised. Okay. S. Barzo, feel free to ask your question, I think, if you have a question. Or you can also put it in the chat box as well. There's another question. Does UBC have the Department of Arts? Oh, UBC has a Department of Arts with lots of majors. Do most of the other have this as well? Yes, this goes across a lot of other universities as well. These departments do have a long list of majors. And so you can definitely check those out as well. But of course, just specifically within the US UBC, Department of Arts, there are lots of majors, and even for like the sciences and engineering, just to name a few, there are quite a few that you can look into that has different and even niche majors as well. So if you are unsure about a major, meaning that you don't need to be very sure about your major. So if your student knows they want to maybe go into the arts, but isn't sure what major just yet, that's okay. You don't even have to list what major they're interested in or considering, as long as they know what degree program they want to go into. That's all we really need for their application. And then after that, they can choose their major of choice, but they usually have some time to kind of figure out what major they want to study as well. All right, another question asks, I noticed that some universities have pathways where students can apply via an exceptional circumstance pathway or submit an exceptional circumstances supplement. Can you talk about when students should and shouldn't go this route? This is a good question. I would say it really depends on the application. So like, for instance, if a student is missing a minimum course requirement for a degree program, that's really a case-by-case basis, and it really just depends per university. So I would actually recommend reaching out to the university rep of whatever university you're looking into, to kind of get more recommendation on that, on how that works. Let's say if a student needs an English language admission standard that needs to be completed, where they do have to submit a test and the test score isn't matching the requirements needed in order to be able to attend that university. There are some pathways that are offered in universities in Canada, so that can be something that students can look into. But I think it really depends on the student. But if you want to talk more about it, feel free to reach out to me or a specific university rep of your choice that you're looking into as well. Okay, since it is 1 minute before it ends, unfortunately, I couldn't answer all of the questions, but if you have any other questions, feel free to direct your questions either specifically to me or just through our AIRR-NA questionnaire form through our website if you have more general questions for a lot of other international universities. But thank you again so much for attending the Global Guidance Summit series. There are more tomorrow. I recommend attending, and I appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.